What's up gamers, it's TreesapJake here with yet another video, and today's video is going to be my enhancement guide for 9.2. Now, if you have no idea who I am, if you've just appeared out of nowhere, if you've just found this channel, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a 2400 experienced shaman. I've been playing Enhancement and I've been playing Elemental Shaman for a number of years since Mr. Pandaria, and I've been PvPing really at a high level since Warlords of Draenor. So I've got a lot of experience with Shaman, and what I found is that I'm able to share this experience through a guide or just through my videos in general and help you out and help you get the rating that you want to do, or at least kind of get an idea of what you want to be playing when you're playing Shaman, at least for PvP. So let's get started. We're going to start off by talking about talents. Now obviously the talents will be changing. The one great thing about 9.2 is that Enhancement has basically got a few more options than it did last patch, and I think that's really awesome. I think in general the amount of flexibility a lot of classes have gotten over this from 9.2 is amazing, and it means that we can actually get out there and use and basically try different things out. So I'm going to be going through the two different builds that I think there are, and I think these are the ones that are going to be, I think probably viable in the meta. I'm going to be going over some of the changes as well to conduits when we get there, so that you kind of got an idea of what's been buffed and why I'm going to be choosing certain bits for certain comps. So this is what I'm going to do. We'll go through the regular one. This is going to be the Doomwinds talent. So this is what you're going to be using with a Doomwinds legendary. Let's get to it. So this is pretty much my standard build that I want to go for. The reason why is because it synergizes so well with the legendary Doomwinds. Now I'll get on to why we're going to be choosing Doomwinds, but first of all, let's go over the talents. So Forceful Winds is the best one to take here. That is because it absolutely buffs Wind Fury by giving successive Wind Fury attacks within 15 seconds and increasing the damage of Wind Fury by 35%, stacking up to 5 times. And this basically does a lot of damage. Combining it with the amount with Unruly Winds and other such conduits that buff Wind Fury damage alongside Doomwinds, it just means that it hits really hard. This is an essential one to take. I wouldn't change it to anything else. It is really, really important. On the 25 tier, Storm Flurry has a 25% chance to strike the target for an additional time for 40% of normal damage. This effect can chain off itself. This works really well with the idea of how Wind Fury works, with sort of like proccing extra attacks. Storm Strike can also proc off like that. It can do a lot of damage in your go that just hits like a truck, and then just in general, it just really, really hurts. So Storm Strike can really, really basically be buffed and do so much damage. It really kind of like helps keep your consistent damage quite high, so this is quite good. So Storm Flurry is what you want to take for number 25. On number 30, you can go for two different things. I like to play Earth Shield. The reason why I like to play Earth Shield is because the passive healing is really, really good. Although it can be purged, and obviously it does cost a fair bit of mana to cut it back on, I really enjoy Earth Shield just for the general passive healing. Also, it gives you 20% extra healing on the person with Earth Shield, and there's also conduits that can buff that too. So I think this is really useful for your self healing, especially as of now, as of the time that you're watching this guide, our healing has been nerfed. The other alternative that you can take is Spirit Wolf. Spirit Wolf is also very good if you just want to kite, get into Spirit Wolf form. If you know that you're going to be going up against, I don't know, like an RMP or maybe like a Rep Warrior or something where you know you're going to sit a lot of CC on the go. Doing this means that you can essentially get 20% wall, which is really nice. It's a really good way of kind of countering that, and there are certain things that you can combine with that to sort of like, counter that method. As long as but to be honest, the skill cap on that is quite high. It means you'll have to kind of preemptively go into Ghost Wolf. So if you feel like you can do that, then go ahead, try it. It's very good for kiting as well, so it's not just for that usage as well. I think it's a very good talent, so you can kind of alternate between both. On the next one, you want to go Elemental Assault. Storm Strike damage is increased by 15%, and Storm Strike now generates 1 stack of Maelstrom Weapon. This is just very important in general to getting healing out and just doing damage and just having just a lot of Maelstrom Weapon to work with. I think this is very, very important. I wouldn't really go for any of the others. I don't think Hailstorm is nearly as good, and Frost Shock damage isn't strong enough for that, even though it's been buffed by 40%. And Fire Nova has also been buffed, but again, it'll break CC. I don't think there's any point using this. Is more maybe a potentially like an RBG talent that you could go for, so that'd be my suggestion there. On the level 40 road, you can change things out. There's two talents that I think you can take. Nature's Guardian is very good when you're going up against melee teams where there is no mind games, where there's no Holy Priest in general, just causing you a lot of damage that way. Nature's Guardian can really keep you topped up, and it's a very good heal. Every 45 seconds, 20% of your maximum health is big, especially as it will obviously scale with when you're using BM trinket, so Battle Master's trinket. Very important. So I think this is good. A lot of priests at the minute, so maybe you might switch it out. Maybe you'll go for Feral Lunge. Feral Lunge is a really good gap closer. It's 30 seconds. Well, I say really good. It's not great, guys. Let's be real. It's not good. In comparison to most classes, we don't have a very good gap closer. But Feral Lunge does it, and it's within 8 to 25 yards, so at least you can kind of get on someone and slow them, at least kind of maintain the target, even if it is a 30-second cooldown. So, you know, it does a little bit of damage, but most of the time it just gets you onto the target. It doesn't slow them or anything, so you make sure they're pre-slowed, and then you can get on and do that. So those are the two that I might actually, you know, play around with. In the level 45 role, you could go Stormkeeper, you could go Crashing Waves, or Crashing Storm, sorry, but I don't think they're really as good as Sundering can be. Sundering procs with your Mastery and procs with your Forceful Winds and Wind Fury damage in general, where it increases the amount of elemental damage that you do. So this one hits like a truck, and it's a really good interrupt. It can crit up to 8k, so not a lot of damage, but it just, you know, it's just disruptive. A 2-second incapacitate as well, so it doesn't really kind of DR with a lot of things. I find Sundering is probably the best option in pretty much every single spec that you want to go for, just because of just the sheer sort of just disruptiveness that it can do. The fact that it can AoE disrupt things is a really big thing, especially if they're in a line. So a lot of things line up, you hit Sundering, that's a lot of 2 seconds, like basically they're just out of the game for a little while. So I think this is really important. Level 50, especially with the Doom Winds, I always go Ascendants. Now, a lot of people don't like to play Ascendants. Some people might play Earthen Spike, but there is a reason why I like Ascendants. I like Ascendants because a lot of the time, especially nowadays, when you're trying to connect to a target, they have so many ways of getting out, especially hunters, a lot of druids, everything. A lot of casters can get away from you very quickly. And I think Ascendants is really good because it gives you a ranged attack. Doing damage to people from afar, and it's a 30-yard range. It also bypasses armor, so it really shreds DKs, really shreds warriors, really shreds paladins, all the ones that have got a high amount of armor, even elemental shamans as well, where you've got the shield. A lot of shielded characters do get shredded by the way that Wind Fury, the way that your auto attacks hit, and also just your general damage. And I think it just hits like a truck basically. So having a range attack, there are a lot of times where, you know, there are a lot of games that I've had where I've actually sort of like swapped away from a target that maybe has blur up, or like, you know, die by the sword, and you swap to the healer because I can hit them from range into a massive chain harvest, and they get one tapped. So you can do that a lot with Doom Winds, and I think Ascendance is a really good one. You could also play Earthen Spike. It does a bit of damage and also increases the damage you deal to the target for 10 seconds. It lines up very well with just general damage output, and also just, you know, your Doom Winds go with 1 minute, so you'll have it up, you'll have it twice before, you know, maybe even like once again after the Doom Winds go, just so that you've got, like, you know, some uptime there. That's 20% extra damage. It does work with Doom Winds, but I think Ascendance tends to be better. I guess it depends on the throw up, which is sort of like you've got guaranteed damage in which you can be CC'd, you can be disarmed for it, you can be knocked out of the go. So, you know, you might, or just rooted in Africa, or just really far away and you're just unable to connect, or you could have the big go every 3 minutes that just hits like a truck, guaranteed one shot a lot of the time. I prefer Ascendance, and it just makes more sense to me. The other spec to go for is in conjunction with a legendary called Witch Doctors, and it's also in conjunction with your tier set, and it works very, very well. This is technically the PvE, I suppose, talent base. This is what you'd use for PvE, and it seems to work really, really well with Witch Doctors, which basically, I'll go on to that in a second, but you'll see why. But I'll just run through why I choose this here. Elemental Blast hits quite actually hard, especially when you're using it in conjunction to your conduits, the ones that buff your caster damage. It can crit up to 15-16k in just sort of like instant cast damage, which is really big, and then increases your critical strike or haste by 3% or mastery by 6% for 10 seconds. So it's very good. You get a mini buff every time you've got that, so every 12 seconds or so, which is really nice. It just keeps the uptime and just your damage going, which is good. So I prefer this one, at least there. Forceful Winds, there's no need to take it, at least in this build, just because I think it just, you don't really need that damage. Wind Fury isn't sort of like, I suppose, synergizing as much anymore. So better to hit something, you know, get some elemental blast going that you can just blast people with damage, especially as a lot of people tend to be going for warriors at the minute, especially when you're playing turbo and stuff like that, or your other teammates. Hot Hand is also very good, 5% chance to reduce the cooldown of Lava Lash by 75% and increase the damage of Lava Lash by 100% for 8 seconds. You'll be pairing up with a different conduit as well, so just a lot of damage will be in your consistent damage with Lava Lash and Storm Strike, and just gives you kind of like more of consistency with terms of damage. I like this one. You could, I suppose, also go Storm Flurry, but Storm Flurry tends to work well with the Wind Fury build, the idea of that kind of 1 minute burst as opposed to more consistent damage. This build is definitely more consistent damage, more just general pressure rather than burst windows, which is why it's very good when you've got, you know, you're queuing into stuff like monks and warriors and rogues that just disarm you the whole time. So this is a really good option. Again, my same reasonings for Earth Shield and Spirit Wolf. I think Earth Shield is really good, but you can make that own choice yourself. I'm still taking Elemental Assault here. I think it's still just the best one out of the level 35. Talent row, I still think Storm Strike doing the damage, because you're still going to be pressing in your rotation. And obviously increase and giving you one stack of Maelstrom weapon is also very important, just for getting out healing, off heals, just doing, you know, elemental blast damage, chain harvest if you go Venthir. And yeah, so I just think this is a very good one to have. So I'd still continue to use it. Again, Nature's Guardian or Feral Lunge, you can make up your mind on this front. It is entirely up to you. So just play it by ear and see what you feel like and see how you get on. Maybe you can stop the mind games more often. Maybe you've got, you know, opportunities to stop it or like control it, and therefore, you know, it works. But that is entirely up to you. So just make sure you are changing it where you need to. Again, I would still take Sundering here. It's still the best by far, and it works really well, especially with terms of your stat weights. I think stats are important as well, thinking about and considering which side we're going on, and depending on which legendary you're going for as well. So I think, you know, with the increase to mastery, for example, your Sundering still hits quite hard, and I think this is important. Now we get to the kind of meat of the issue here. Elemental Spirits reduces the cooldown of your Feral Spirits by 30 seconds and causes your Feral Spirits to be imbued with Fire, Frost or Lightning, enhancing your abilities. So Elemental Spirits makes your Spirit Wolves do, you know, basically it's sort of like I think it's a 1 minute 30 cooldown. Yeah, 1 minute 30 cooldown. And they do a lot of damage, and the resetting part of it as well. They just seem to get off cooldown very quickly. It feels like they're up more often, basically, and especially with your tier set as well. Once you get your tier set, they'll have a greater chance for those to be, you know, reduced on cooldown, and also the legendary does that too. So they're just up all the time. It's like a very much kind of like a just consistent damage build where you just abilities are hitting hard and you just everything works like that. So important. So that's kind of the two talent builds. We'll just very briefly talk about stat weights and what you want to go for stats wise. I think if you're playing the Doomwinds build, you want to make sure that you've got a lot of crit and haste. Obviously Versa is up there as well. Versa naturally will happen, but crit and haste are the best things you can go for. I found that the more crit I've got, the harder I tend to hit. There seems to be a lot more one-shotting, a lot more big damage with my chain harvest. Just in general, my Wind Fury tends to hit quite hard, and sometimes it won't hit very hard, it hit like a wet noodle, and then other times it just rinses people, and I think that's important. I don't think there's any point really in having haste. Like being able to hit fast doesn't really do too much. The main thing you want to rely on is big burst and just like getting the damage out as quickly as possible. Crit seems to do very well for me. There'll be others that will probably go for more of a haste build, but I think crit haste kind of being very balanced in that regard tends to work very well. I'd go for more crit if I'm playing Doomwinds. However, if I'm playing the Spirit Wolf build, you want to go for mastery, and I think this is the reason why. Your mastery increases your chance to trigger Stormbringer and Wind Fury by whatever amount. That's fine, but the big thing is it increases all Fire, Frost and Nature damage dealt by 16%. This is important. If you up that to maybe like 25 or even more, 30, 40%, if you could do, then a lot of your damage is going to hit quite hard, especially when you're using Elemental Wolves, Sundering, your Lightning Bolt, you're pressing, even if you're using like, you're going to Night Fae, which I think will be the key thing for this build, you'll kind of see that damage kind of coming out, and it'll be buffed quite significantly. So I think that'll be really interesting to kind of just see, and I think that's kind of how we're going to go on the stat weight. So to kind of summarize, if you're playing the Witch Doctors build, you want to go for Mastery and Versa, and I think if you're going Doomwinds, you want to be Crit and Versa, and I think those are the sort of stat weights that I think will kind of benefit. This may change as time goes on, obviously, as we kind of discover more, but at the beginning, I think this is going to be the stat weights of how I'd probably want to be building my characters. Let's talk about PvP talents. The one that is going to stay the same pretty much throughout is probably going to be Grounding Totem. Pretty much everything. I mean, what you're mostly going to be queuing into is a lot of priests, a lot of druids. And even when you're going up against Resto Shamans or even Mistweavers, most of the time they tend to have some sort of range in there. So Grounding Totem tends to be just my go-to, and it just stays there. The other one that you really want to go for, and I think that should really stay for there, is probably Ride the Lightning. That got buffed this patch, and I think just the cleave in general is quite good. So far, it hasn't really broken any CC. It tends to avoid CC from what I can see. I might be wrong on this, so guys, if you've had experience where this has broken CC, let me know. But so far, for me playing, and I've played a lot this season so far, it hasn't broken any CC, which is really, really good, as most of the time the healers tend to be quite far away. In general, further than 40 feet, or we've been going healers, so I haven't really noticed anything where it's broken the CC. If you're playing with a druid, it doesn't really matter anyway. But yeah, I tend to think Ride the Lightning is very, very good. The other alternatives you could go for is Thunder Charge and Shamanism, but I think that Ride the Lightning has a lot of cleave damage, and I think just in general just seems to do a lot. I wouldn't really go for anything else. I'll tell you, I've got some tips and tricks for ethereal form, so we'll come back to that eventually. Somebody remind me. Ethereal form, tips and tricks. So yeah, that's the one I think there. Otherwise, Swelling Waves is really, really good just for your self-healing, especially with it being nerfed. I think Swelling Waves would be good just to keep the baseline, just because it helps out. The other alternative you could go for with here, without Swelling Waves, is you could go for Static Field Totem as a way to basically just pen people in. It tends to be killed quite quickly, but I think Static Field Totem does have a place in the sense that you can just kind of keep it locked in. And of course, if you're playing with another caster and you want to buff that caster, Sky Fury is also a good one to go for. Otherwise, Spectral Recovery with Spirit Wolf can be a really good way to maybe just pre-Spirit Wolf a big RMP go if you've got no trinket. That might work out. Something to do. Something as a means of stopping that. If you find yourself dying a lot, try this out. I think that's a really good way of sorting things out. But otherwise, that's your PvP talents. You can play around with them, but I think in general, these are the kind of ones that you kind of want to just stick to, and I tend to stick to, and I've had quite a lot of success with this. So yeah, that is my opinion. Now let's talk about legendaries, and especially we're going to be talking about double legendary, and this will depend on your covenant as well. So we are going to be talking about covenant straight after this, but in terms of legendaries, these are the two that I think are going to be quite strong. Doom Winds, which as we know that was prevalent last season and in the first season. Dropping Wind Fury Totem grants you a 100% chance to gain Wind Fury weapon and increase Wind Fury weapon damage by 25% for 12 seconds. So just to bear this in mind, it doesn't matter if they kill the Wind Fury Totem, you still have Doom Winds. So when people go to kill Wind Fury Totem, don't start dropping it down. That's fine. They can do that. All the Wind Fury doing is basically buffing your party member and yourself to get extra chances for auto attack. Doom Winds doesn't stop being a thing. Obviously, without the Wind Fury Totem, it's it doesn't have that as much of a chance to proc it. But the main thing is that you've already got Wind Fury weapon on your weapon. You're going to still be proccing like an absolute chief, and I still do. Yeah, having it down may help, but don't waste your breath. Don't go out of your mind trying to re-drop down, wasting globals pressing Wind Fury Totem. Just focus on doing hella damage, because I'm telling you, it really doesn't make too much of a difference. And I've had no problems just flat out ignoring re-putting it down once they kill the Wind Fury Totem. What they probably want to be doing, and what people should be doing, is basically CCing the shit out of you, because your damage is nuts at this point. It is very bursty, and every minute or so is good. The only drawback with it, as we've obviously discovered in the last couple of seasons, that disarm every minute is up, and yeah, it's rough, which is why sometimes it's nice to play with another melee rather than a ranged, because they don't tend to disarm the enhancement when the warrior, for example, is bursting really hard, or the ret is bursting really hard, or the demon hunter, monk, whatever. People tend to not, well, I mean, obviously they don't disarm the monk or the demon hunter, but warriors and the rets, they'll disarm them instead of you. That just tends to be the thing. I mean, I would probably do the same. But getting disarmed on Doom Winds is really annoying. The other one that we have been talking about is Witch Doctor's Wolf Bones. It increases the chance to gain a stack of Maelstrom weapon by 3%, so obviously that's big. And whenever you gain a stack of Maelstrom weapon, the cooldown of Feral Spirits is reduced by 2 seconds. So what does this mean? This means that whenever you actually go to get Maelstrom weapons, which you get a lot of from actually having your Spirit Wolves out, and obviously every time you press Storm Strike, etc., etc., that's why we go for Storm Flurry as well, to kind of keep the weapon granting us Maelstrom weapons. So it all links up here, is that we reduce Feral Spirits. Now, if our Feral Spirits is buffed, and with the tier set, which I'll talk about in just 1 second, it means that just the cooldowns of everything is just lowered significantly, which is big. And obviously Feral Spirits does a lot more extra damage. It buffs you. So there you go. The consistent damage becomes really, really high. And this will be really interesting to see what it's like when everyone's got their tier sets. I think it's going to pump a lot of damage, and you're just going to get a lot of consistent damage out. If you ever watch the Race to World First at the minute, you might see that Trill is playing Enhancement Shaman, and watching him with the full tier set doing as much damage, they can be top of the game. Especially like Clicks as well, another Enhancement Shaman in Echo, so an EU Enhancement Shaman. They do a lot of damage, and it's huge. So I'm really excited to see how this works. Some of the other builds that you can go for: Legacy of the Frost Witch, which buffs your Storm Strike. I've seen this being used. It can hit quite hard. It takes people by surprise as well, because you think, oh, I'm waiting for Doom Winds, but it never comes. Instead, it just resets the cooldown of Storm Strike and makes it do a heller amount of damage. So, you know, with Wind Fury buffs and Forceful Winds, the same build that you would use for Doom Winds, you can do quite a bit of damage. The other one that I've seen as well is Primal Lava Actuators. Each time Flame Shock deals periodic damage, increases the damage of your next Lava Lash by 12% and reduces the cooldown of Lava Lash by 0.5 seconds. You can play this with Necrolord, but I don't think it's as strong. Lava Lash doesn't hit quite hard enough. It's a really good, maybe consistent pressure one, but you can try it out and see if you like it. But I suppose those are the 4 real legendaries that you can go for. So talking about the double legendaries, it kind of goes without saying that there is a lot of synergy here, and that there's a lot of things that line up in certain legendaries versus other legendaries. And one of the ones I want to talk about specifically is the Night Fae one. Each pulse of Fae Transfusion's damage effect reduces the cooldown of Ferro Spirit by 9 seconds, increases your critical strike chance for 4% for 15 seconds. Now, this is the reason why I think this is big, is because it's the cooldown of Feral Spirit and allows you essentially to get the Feral Spirits back. And obviously, it kind of works in the same way that a Night Fae works. The Night Fae ability works in mages, how it resets cooldowns, for example, on your Fire Blast and everything. This is kind of like a minor version of it, and obviously does some damage. Doesn't do a lot of damage, it's not absolutely like crazy damage, but it does something at least. And here, it obviously allows you to reduce the cooldown of Feral Spirit, which means that you have that up more often, so you're doing a lot more damage. And obviously that works really well with the tier set, which we're going to talk about. So bear this in mind when you have a look at the tier sets. It'll be really, really big. So just have a look at that. The other one I want to talk about is the Elemental Conduit. This is the Venthyr one. This is the other option that I'd go for. Up to 5 friendly players helped by Chain Harvest will have Riptide casting them. Up to 5 enemy targets damaged by Chain Harvest will have Flame Shock casting them. Flame Shock critical strike, reduce the cooldown of Chain Harvest by 1 second. This is another big one. I think having the cooldown on Chain Harvest means that it would be massive with Doom Winds. So obviously Flame Shock critical strike chances, which happens quite a bit, just reduces the cooldown of Chain Harvest, and it just means that you smack people really, really hard. And I think it just in general will have that up. It's basically Chain Harvest. I've always seen that as a sort of like a way to kind of get yourself out of trouble and execute. It's either an execute or kind of help the team. So if you're really, really low and you're getting shredded, press Chain Harvest and everyone will be okay. If you're having a rough time, if you're getting someone low and they're about to die, press Chain Harvest and they just get murdered. So this is how I see it, and obviously this will increase the amount of healing and increase the amount of damage that you do with it as well. So it'll be really big, and I think this works out really well with Doom Winds. And obviously, guys, you want to be doing this with Unity, which is where you get it from the campaign. Make sure you get the campaign where you just get it on your belt. That'll be really, really useful for you. Otherwise, get to Revered so you can put it on any other piece, and that's the main thing, and that's what we want to go for. So that is your double legendaries. So this is the tier set. Now, we've spoken about how the double legendary, especially with Night Fae, tends to buff your feral spirits and how it reduces the cooldown. And as you can see here, reducing the cooldown and having feral spirits up further increases your just general damage output. Your 2-piece called Storm Spirit, when you're spending Maelstrom Weapon, has a 3% chance per charge spent to summon a single feral spirit for 9 seconds. So this is a proc chance of feral spirits being up. This synergizes really well with Witch Doctors, as we've already explained, just buffing your damage overall. And obviously when you have a 3% chance that you times that by 5, that's about a 15% chance every time you use sort of Lightning Bolt, Chain Harvest, a heal, for a Feral Spirit to come out and give you more Maelstrom Weapon. With the 4-piece, however, any of your active Feral Spirits have a 20% chance per attack to trigger Stormbringer effect on you. And now the Stormbringer effect is a very special, vital one. It's your special attacks have a 5% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Storm Strike. You might not be able to see it on the screen there, but that's what it does. So it increases that damage, and then I think also it increases the damage of your next Storm Strike by 25%. So just in general, your damage is buffed with the 4-set bonus, alongside with the Night Fae one, as well as obviously your Venthyr double legendary. You're just going to be putting out a lot of damage, a lot of healing, etc, etc. So that's how they work and synergize together. You want to try and get the 4-set bonus as quickly as possible. I think the damage output is just insane, and obviously Stormbringer having a 20% chance, as well as on top of your regular chance to activate it, is just incredible. So you'll be putting out a lot of damage, and especially if you manage to get it happening during your, using Feral Spirits during your Doomwind go, or using Feral Spirits just in general, you're just going to have a lot of damage output. So now let's talk about Covenants. So this is the big question. What Covenant would you play with each spec? Now, I would say the Venthyr one is definitely best for Doomwinds. You're going to have a lot of pressure, and Chain Harvest does a lot of damage just off the bat. So what you want to make sure you're doing is being Venthyr for when you're playing Doomwinds, because of a lot of things. First of all, Draven is really good. I think he's a really good defensive talent to go for. Defensive, I suppose Soulbind to go for. And I think, they've got a lot of traits in there that are really useful. Even Nadia herself has really good ways of basically lowering the duration of incoming interrupts and snares, which I think is really, really good. So Venthyr is really good, and it just hits really hard. I think it's just got a lot of access to a nice bit of potency conduits as well. Just just hit like a truck, really. And I think that's important. Also, the self-healing is nuts, and I think that's going to be really good. But what you want to play for the Witch Doctors one is you want to be playing Night Fae, and that's because of Fae Transfusion. And Fae Transfusion's nature damage is buffed by everything that comes out. Your Feral Spirits are doing that. You do a lot of damage. It just can hit quite hard. It's just the AoE, just pure damage output that can be really, really big. And I think also just using stuff like Nia, where you buff your mastery, and that also increases your damage done by like your fire, nature, everything like that. So your mastery bonus there is really big. And I think having an extra slow on top of that from the burrs that drop on the ground are really just important. There's just a lot of damage to put out. You could also play Pod Tender. You could have that sort of like I guess death immunity coming back, resurrection, that you could do if you get focused down against like really hard comps. So there's lots of different opportunities there, and I think just the general consistent damage is really big. So those are the two covenants that I go for. Now let's talk about Soulbinds. So I think some of the Soulbinds that you should definitely take, let's start actually with the defensive ones. So Endurance, you definitely want Vital Accretion. Increasing your maximum health when you got your Earth Alley out means that you can kind of handle big goes like RMP. Making sure that that's out. There's a lot of HP you got to go through. That's like maybe like 80k almost of HP you got to go through. And obviously this only gets better when you've got a higher conduit. So there'll be more and more health for you to get. What else you could go for is you could go for Condensed Animosphere as well. 4.2% of your maximum health that goes up every 10 seconds. That's really, really good. You could also go for Refreshing Waters as well. That one I have been using, which is where your Healing Surge is 22% more effective on yourself. Obviously, if you've got better conduits, this goes up massively. If you've got 250 conduits, this goes up quite a bit. It just all adds up really, basically. So yeah, that's a really good one. Those are probably the best endurance conduits that I'd go for. In terms of your finesse conduits, I think the only real useful one is Totemic Surge. You could also play Crippling Hex, where you reduce damage, where your enemy who has Hex on them does reduce damage for 8 seconds after it's removed, 12% reduced damage. That can be quite useful, but again, defensive talent, I think honestly Totemic Surge is better with the amount of fears, slows, and just stuns that you need to kind of get out. It just helps reduce that completely. So I think Totemic Surge is probably the best in finesse. In terms of potency, the ones that I really like is you want to make sure you guaranteed have Unruly Winds, especially if you're playing, your Doom Winds. You want Unruly Winds, 35% to trigger a third attack by Wind Fury, which is really big. This is obviously buffed the higher you go, so again, it does a lot of damage. You also want to make sure you have Focused Lightning. Maelstrom Weapon increases the damage or healing of your next spell by an additional 9% per stack. This is being nerfed, unfortunately, so it's not quite as strong, but I don't think it's going to be doing way too much. I think the healing is still going to be good, but I don't think it's going to be just as good. The main thing is that the damage is still massive, so this is why you do big chain harvests, and this is why your lightning bolts hit really hard. So yeah, something to think about. Those are the kind of, I suppose, conduits you want to go for. Swirling Currents is also another good one. Using Healing Stream Totem increases the healing of your next 3 Healing Surge, Healing Wave, or Riptide spells. That's obviously a restoration potency conduit, but it works really, really well for Healing Surge on yourself, so it still will buff your healing. So you have certain windows in which you can do buffed healing. You just have to be a bit more, I suppose, strategic with it rather than just willy-nilly. So those are the ones I go for. This is pretty much what I'd still play even after the nerfs. I think this is going to a really good defensive talent, especially if you're in long CC, like long kidney shots. This is where I think Hold Your Ground comes in. Increased healing done on yourself and 10% extra stamina. This is really important. But you could also go Nadia and go for sort of know, the bigger haste, more crit. This is more of a defense, more of an offensive, I think, Soulbind. So yeah, again, if you're looking to play the Witch Doctors one, or some of the other sort of Lava Lash focused builds, you want to go for something like this. You want to use Magma Fist instead. So Lava Lash has an additional 28% critical strike chance against enemies affected with your Flame Shock, so that just buffs the damage there. But otherwise, you want to keep the same thing, basically. You could also use Chill to the Core, but again, 42% chance to grant 2 stacks of Maelstrom Weapon. It's possible. I think you could probably put this in, but again, it's a potency conduit where I wouldn't really want to take out some of my self-healing. I really wouldn't want to get rid of Swirling Currents. You could get rid of Swirling Currents, but to be honest, I'm not pressing Frost Shock, I think, enough. Really, I'm often relying on my warrior to do that, so you kind of got to decide for yourself whether you think this is worthwhile. It could be, you could play it, but yeah, so that's basically your Soulbinds and conduits. I hope that makes sense. It just depends on how your play style is, I think, a lot of the time, but this is the one that benefits me. I think this is probably the best for self-healing, which is one of the biggest points of playing Enhancement, is that you just don't die. You got to keep yourself up, and as long as your teammates can peel for you when you're in a stun, you're pretty much a live lord, and you can also help them out too. So let's think about comps. What comps would you go for? There is only one really majorly viable comp for Enhance, and sadly that is just Turbo. It's too good. You want to play with a Kyrian warrior or a Necrolord warrior. Either works, but with the way that the double legendary works, I think it's going to be too strong. That's the main comp that you want to play. And I think that's a really big one. It just hits like a truck, and the pressure that you can keep up if you play with a Restoration Druid or a Holy Priest, even a Holy Paladin or a Mistweaver, you've got a lot of pressure that comes out, and a lot of CC that can come out, and it's just nuts. So that would be what I play. Maybe even Turbo with a Necrolord H-Pala looks like it could be really dirty, so I'd like to see that in play. Otherwise, you could play other comps. You could try stuff out. You could play Beast Cleave. I played that up to 2-3 last season as well, so it is definitely viable. This was before the inflation got very big, so it's definitely a viable comp to a degree. Maybe with either like a MM Hunter, BM Hunter, or a Survival. You could try. They've all been buffed. Apparently, Survival's going to be S tier, so you could do that as like another melee, because obviously you got guaranteed trap and just the go during the big trap go, and maybe you're playing with a Resto Druid, so the Resto Druid can get like a Cyclone, and then one on the DPS, and then you've got a trap on the healer, and then you do so much damage together that it's nuts. Those are the options. With Doomwinds, I'd say probably not you don't want to play, I think, the Witch Doctors in that one. You want to rely on burst damage in CC windows. Otherwise, you could play with a Warlock. You could try play with a Ret Paladin. You could do Turbo Fist, which is Windwalker Enhance. You could try with a few other melees, but I think it tends to do very well with other melees where you kind of like chase them down, especially stuff that's got Mortal Strike, because you don't have a Mortal Strike. You could even play with a DH, Demon Hunter. I think that'd be really, really fun to play. It just depends, and see how things go. You could try things like the more consistent Witch Doctors build with a Demon Hunter, just because you'll both have ridiculously consistent high damage, and you'll just out pressure them. Play with a Resto Druid or a Holy Priest just for the CC chain. So, and you just go from there, and you kill during the stun goes, a big eye beam, and just general just pressure with Spirit Wolf. So that's how I'd go. You could go with Doomwinds as well. There's multiple different options, and I think those are the best comps for you, really. I'm definitely going to be trying all of those out, so do stick around and make sure that you subscribe to my channel to see all the Enhancement gameplay, as well as Elemental Shaman gameplay, lots of Shaman gameplay in general. So we're going to have lots to look forward to. Now I want to just go over some tips and tricks. So we're going to jump to an old location that you might recognize. Okay guys, so now onto the tips and tricks. Now, number one tip and trick I can give with Enhance is to not forget that there is a bug. And that bug is that every time you join an instance, so that's an RBG or a arena, you have to refresh your Wind Fury weapon and your Flame Tongue weapon, because if you don't, they will not proc, they will not exist. It'll be like you have no enchants, even if there is 58 seconds left. You've just joined an arena. If you don't press them on in the arena, you'll especially recognize this when you press Doomwinds and it doesn't hit at all hard, and you're like, what's going? It's because you have no Wind Fury. It doesn't do anything. A prime example, by the way, of why pressing Wind Fury totem doesn't matter. When you have Wind Fury weapon on you, that's when Doomwinds matters. So when I'm saying that if they kill the Wind Fury totem, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because when you press it without it, it does fuck all, quite literally. It does no damage. So that's a big point. In case you need the Wind Fury weapon on, you've got to make sure that you've got it on. You want to make sure it's there. So make sure you've got it on before you do anything. Just always remind yourself, as soon as you go in, instantly put it on. That's a very key point, because it can be really difficult to do anything if you haven't got that on. Even if you're playing Witch Doctors, you just need it. The damage output becomes minimal. So especially with the Doom Winds. This is kind of more of a situational tip, and I was kind of alluding to it earlier, is that instead of, say, playing like Ride the Lightning, for example, if you're queuing into, I don't know, something like maybe like even like a Warrior DK or Warrior Hunter or Rogue Hunter, so Thug Cleave, so like an MM Hunter Rogue, or something that does a lot of physical damage, take Ethereal Form. It's a 45-second cooldown, so it's a lot lower of a cooldown than your Astral Shift. But the main thing about it is that it makes you turn ethereal. You become immune to all physical damage, but you're unable to attack, cast spells, and your movement speed is reduced by 50%, lasts 18 seconds. One of the biggest things about it, and what I don't think a lot of people know this, is that you can walk out of the Kyrian Spear with Ethereal Form. Now, obviously, the Warrior will still do a little bit of magical damage to you because of Kyrian, but the main thing is you walk out of it and you're no longer affected by the big crit chance on yourself. Also, the Warrior can't hit you for shit. So that means that all of his big damage is doing absolutely bugger all. It also means that I'm fairly sure you cannot be stunned, or you can be stunned, but it still does no damage to you. So they can keep you in there, it still does no damage. All that's happening is that little bit of Kyrian Spear damage, which is a little bit of a tick, and your healer will be able to keep up with you. Obviously, the main thing is you can't heal yourself, and in order to get out and do stuff, you need to obviously press it off again, and that's only when the cooldown goes off. So unlike Astral Shift, where you've got the cooldown go off and it starts the timer, this does not start the timer until you click it off. So if you have it on for longer than you need to, don't, is the answer. Make sure you turn it off before it turns off, before you know it becomes redundant and you're just wasting your time sitting around. But during a big go from an MM Hunter Rogue, so for example, if they open up on you and you get in the first kidney, Trinket, Ethereal Form, they do nothing to you, 0 damage. Or if you pre-Ethereal Form the go, you sit in the kidney, they do absolutely 0 damage to you, and it's actually, you can just sit back and laugh, because I've done that multiple times, it's hilarious, but they do nothing, and it's an incredibly good PvP talent, very underrated for going into Warriors and stuff like that, and I'm going to be testing it out more, especially in this season, to see how much damage it does negate during those goes, because 45 seconds, it links up very nicely with the Kyrian Spear, so as long as you're using it right and using it, you can basically avoid pretty much anything. It's like, you know, with the way that you could walk out of it when you're a Death Knight, with I think Death's Advance or something like that, you can just walk out of it. Very good, it just reduces all that damage there, so that's a very good key point. The other one I really want to talk about is something just to do with burst damage, and this is something I noticed very quickly, especially when you're playing Doom Winds. One of the big things is that Ascendance lasts for 15 seconds, and Doom Winds lasts for 12 seconds. And before, I'd be pressing Doom Winds, and I'd have a whole global to press Ascendance, and I found myself that I was wasting a lot of my Doom Winds time. The best thing that you want to do is when you're attacking something here, so let's say you're attacking this, you know, you want to get your Flame Shock up, you want to, you know, press Lava Lash, and obviously that spreads it over to someone. And then what you want to do when you're ready to go, obviously get your Spirit Wolves out for fun. You then want to make sure you press Ascendance. You want to then press your Doom Winds, and that's when you start pressing like your damage, and that's when the damage comes out there. And then you just Chain Harvest when you've got a lot of things there. Press a bit of Sundering. It does a lot of damage there, and you can just see the damage kind of gets higher. But it means that I have a lot longer of time with my Ascendance in Doom Winds. And unlike basically before, where I was pressing Doom Winds and Ascendance, by the time I got through to the globals, that's basically 2 globals, it was already sort of like 8 seconds left on my Doom Winds, and I felt, you know what, this felt really shit. So instead, press Ascendance first, then your Doom Winds. You're still doing massive, damage from your auto strikes. So you know, that's the biggest thing here. You're still doing the big damage from your auto strikes anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. And because of that, you know, it just gives you more time to basically do things. Another trick here is with Forceful Winds, is to make sure that you get your Wind Fury attack damage increased, and that, you know, that your damage is kind of buffed. When you've got multiple stacks on this, you want to try and use Sundering when you've got 5 stacks of basically Forceful Winds, and it does seem to like basically like absolutely smash through the damage. So that's another important thing to know. Just useful tips like that kind of helped me out. really early on, just do some huge damage. If you've seen some of my videos before, like I one-shot Cervantes, basically from doing that, big ascendants, that hits really hard. That obviously, you know, I've got that macroed in with my trinket too, as well as my Wind Fury totem there. So my trinket comes out, my damage is high because obviously I've got my primary stat increase, sorry, and it just hits like a truck, and that's really useful. So guys, that's the end of the video. That's everything. That's really all of my shared knowledge from playing Enhance over the last couple of seasons. I've really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to playing more in 9.2. I'm going to be really pushing with Turbo, I think, but give me a shout. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll best answer them to, you know, as much as I can, to the best of my ability. I will answer what I can do for you. Let me know how your adventures go. Let me know what rating you get to. Let me know if it's helped. I really like to do that. And most importantly, please do subscribe. Do give it a thumbs up if you really enjoyed this video. Please share it to your friends. Go follow me on Twitter. Go follow me on Twitch. Come see me live. And hopefully, I will see you soon. But otherwise, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.